Hey guys, former film student back today with another video, this time episode 14 of 31 Nights, 31 Frights, the series where I review a different horror film every day of October. Today we are going way back, all the way to the 1960s with Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. So Psycho, as I mentioned, was released in 1960. It is directed by Alfred Hitchcock, the master of suspense himself, and this is a movie that I feel just everybody has heard of at some point or another. It is just a very iconic film, which I think is really funny because when you read up about this film and you read up that basically when this film was released, it was pretty hated amongst critics and audience members. It wasn't until sort of years later that people really started to like this movie and appreciate it for all the things that it does really well. I'm going to be getting into spoilers for this movie. Normally, I don't talk heavy spoilers in these reviews, but since this movie is, from the 60s, it's now, you know, 60 years old at this point. I feel like it's safe to talk about spoilers. I do highly recommend this movie. If you're waiting to just whether I, recommend this movie or not, I'm going to put it here and say I do recommend this movie a lot. This is one of those classics that even if you're not someone who appreciates or enjoys going back to older films, whether it's just because you don't like how they look, how they sound, you just don't like watching older films, you're just, someone who enjoys movies, but you like watching newer stuff. This is one that I think a lot of people can find a lot of enjoyment in. If you're going into it expecting to be terrified and to be really scared like you would in a modern day horror film, I don't think that you're going to get exactly what you want out of this movie. I don't exactly find this movie terrifying, and I think a lot of that has to do with, again, this movie is 60 years old. It was released in 1960, so a lot of what people thought was scary back then just doesn't translate to being as scary in today's day and age. But that being said, there's still a lot of stuff to enjoy about this movie and a lot of stuff that I find very unsettling, very creepy. But I'm just giving you guys a spoiler warning. I'm going to be talking about a lot of the plot details in this movie. Um, you know, Not just the premise, but just going into the actual what happens in the film from start to finish. Yep, I'm giving you guys a spoiler warning in three, two, one. Alright, if you're still here, then I assume that you have seen this film or that you just do not care about spoilers. Anyway, let's get into what this movie does so well. For starters, I think it does something really interesting, something that I had never really seen in a movie before this, and essentially it kills off its main character within the first 15 to 20 minutes of the film. It kills off Marion Crane, who the film sort of sets up as this protagonist. You see her in a car getting away from something, running away from presumably some problem she's caused, and you expect her to be the heroine of the movie. You expect her to be the one that we're rooting for, that we follow along, and within the first 15, 20, maybe a little longer than that, she's dead. She's killed by seemingly someone that you're not really sure who it is. You're sort of thinking it's one person, and the film starts to make you believe other things. So it sort of has that sort of murder mystery element going on. But this movie is just so cool. I think it's such a genius concept, and we've seen it done since then, where a movie will sort of give you a character that you think is going to be its protagonist, and it just kills it off. I think if you guys have seen the 2019 film, or maybe it was 2020, I think it came out this year, I'm sorry, The Hunt, it's the one that got a bunch of flack for being too woke and too liberal, because it was like very anti-conservative, and I watched the film and it's not. It pokes fun at liberals and conservatives alike. People just got really bent out of shape because people don't know how to take a joke. But anyway, I think that movie plays on Psycho a little bit and sort of pays homage to it just a little bit, but in a very over-the-top fashion. In that movie, you think that like this set of characters are going to be the main characters, dead, and then they introduce you to more characters, dead, and within the first 15 to 20 minutes of that movie, you've gone through at least 10 to 12 different characters that you thought were going to be like the stars of the film, and they're just not. So Psycho clearly influenced a lot of films. Alfred Hitchcock as a director has always, been such an influence on not only myself, but a lot of people I talk to. As you could tell by the title of this channel, I did go to film school, and he's taught very heavily. But Psycho is one that's really not talked about a lot in film school. It's definitely not his best movie. A lot of people seem to think that North by Northwest or some of his other very famous works are his better works, and that this one just gets the most attention. I think because it is the most easily accessible. It is a very well done psychological thriller. and Alfred Hitchcock directs it in such a great way. It's so suspenseful. It's very thrilling. The mystery's great. But yeah, I was really surprised going through film school and learning about Alfred Hitchcock and not really mentioning this movie a lot. They taught his other works. I even wrote a paper on one of his other films that we viewed in my freshman year film analysis class. But yeah, Psycho is just the one that I think everybody knows by him. Everyone associates Psycho with Alfred Hitchcock, especially more casual movie viewers, ones that really haven't dug into his filmography. You mentioned Hitchcock, and Psycho is the one that people associate with it. And I think there's something to be said about that, about how culturally iconic it is at this point. That a movie that maybe it's not his best work by any stretch, but it's so well known, it's so well associated with him, and again, it does so many things right. I mentioned that it does something very unique by killing off its main character, but also the plot twist at the end of the movie. I think the plot twist is one that I think still holds up today. It adds a lot to the film. It's such a creepy and unsettling twist that I think really adds a lot of rewatchability to this film. And of course, Norman Bates. He's such an interesting character, such a fascinating character in cinema. And Anthony Perkins, my God, he does such a fantastic job in this movie.
You've never had an empty moment in your entire life, have you?
Only my share.
Where are you going? I didn't mean to pry.
I'm looking for a private island.
What are you running away from?
Why do you ask that?
He is so good as this sort of creepy and unsettling character, but also you sort of feel bad for him. You sort of feel a lot of sympathy for this character. He's clearly psychologically damaged. He's clearly had some traumatic things happen to him and sort of had a traumatic upbringing in childhood. So there's this extra layer of sympathy, very similar to what I mentioned in my review for I'm Thinking of Ending Things, the Netflix film that was released this year, currently my favorite film of the year. But in that movie, Jesse Plemons plays a character named Jake, and he sort of has that same thing. He's creepy, he's unsettling, not as much as Norman Bates is, but he's sort of creepy, he's unsettling, he says some off-kilter things, but also there's this extra layer of sympathy that you have for the character just in the way he's portrayed, the way he's written. And you get that a lot in this movie as well. On top of that, I love the black and white filmography in this film. The cinematography is fantastic. Alfred Hitchcock is a master of framing and composition. All of his movies are gorgeously shot with great camera work, great lighting, great composition. The obvious, infamous shower scene in this movie is one of the most iconic scenes of all time in any movie. Everybody knows the shower scene. Everybody knows that scene. It's just one of the most iconic scenes of all time. And it's so interestingly cut and shot because in modern day, I would hate a scene like that. I would hate a scene that's cut like 60, 70 times in the span of like 2 minutes, It's very heavily cut. But obviously at the time, they didn't have the technology, they didn't have the makeup work, the practical effects, the capability to showcase probably a more brutal murder. So you're just sort of left with this very hyper edited scene of this woman getting killed in the shower. But it really works in this movie. I think it just really plays well with the movie's style, with the movie's time period. Some critiques that I have in movies nowadays are just ones that I can't really apply to older films because older films had a disadvantage. They didn't have as much money, they didn't have a lot of the technology or the capability to do a lot of things they can do nowadays. But again, the shower scene in this movie really works. It has a lot of charm to it. And this movie in general has a lot of charm to it. Even though it's a horror film, it's thrilling, it's a psychological thriller, there's a lot of elements of this movie that I find very comforting. It has sort of a cozy feel to it. I'm not sure why that is. Maybe it's the black and white. Maybe it's just because it's a movie that I watched when I was really young, so there's some nostalgia there for it. But in the end, I think Psycho is a fantastic movie. I don't think that there is much I dislike about this movie. It's a classic for a reason. It's one of Alfred Hitchcock's best films. It's one of the best psychological thrillers, I think, to this day. It holds up 60 years later, despite being a movie that came out, so long ago. I think it still really holds up. And yeah, I cannot recommend this movie enough. If you have not seen Psycho, I highly recommend checking it out. It's the actual 60th anniversary edition Blu-ray that I have here. They were selling it at Target for $10. I'm not sure if it's at every Target, but hey, go visit your local Target if you can. They're having a sale on horror films, and I was able to get this bad boy for $10. I'm really excited actually to see. It says that it includes two versions, the uncut version, which is, I guess, the extended version, which I don't think I've ever seen, and just the normal version. Also, the bunch of bonus features, the making of Psycho, how they did the sound for the film, a whole little mini documentary about Hitchcock's legacy. So there's a lot of cool stuff in this. This is not a Blu-ray review. I just had this out here, so I thought I would show it to you. Again, very similar to the Exorcist case. Also, I really like this. It's like a matted black with Norman Bates in like this very stark black and white contrast. Anyway, yeah, so this was my review of Psycho. Let me know in the comments down below if you've seen Psycho. If you have, let me know your thoughts on it. I'd love to know if you guys enjoy this movie, if you think that it holds up. Maybe you think it's a little dated or you think it's a little bit overrated. I totally understand. Again, I do recommend this movie, and if you go and watch it and absolutely hate it, I do apologize as always. It's not for everyone, but it is definitely for me. As always, if you liked the video, make sure to click the like button, subscribe to me if you'd like to hear more from me, click the little bell notification so you do get notified when I post new videos, and as always, I will see you guys on the next episode.